Hello and welcome to the Womxn Show. I'm Lenina Rasool and today we are speaking about trauma and healing. Now we know that trauma, depression, anxiety and other mental health disorders have been in the news quite a bit lately with the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown, but we also know that a lot of us carry trauma from other events that have happened throughout our lives that remain unprocessed. Now today we are going to be speaking to Judith Kennedy, who is the co-founder of an organization called InsideOut NPO, who are holding healing circles in various communities to help people speak about their traumas and also help them process it. But before that, we are going to take a look at a short video that explains what is trauma and how does it manifest in our daily lives. Let's have a look.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology. From the earliest years, relationships with others play a key role in shaping how our brain grows and develops. Early relationships, where there is abuse and neglect, have a long-term impact on children. A brain that has adapted to survive in a threatening or unpredictable world may not work so well in an ordinary environment. This can create what is called latent vulnerability, where early abusive or neglectful experiences with carers put children at greater risk of experiencing mental health problems in the future. For these children, compared to their peers, common experiences like moving to a new school can feel more daunting and stressful. New faces can appear threatening, while positive social cues can be missed. It can be harder to negotiate new social situations and learn to trust new people. Even fun experiences like joining a new sports team can be challenging. Too much focus on potential threat cues can mean missing out on positive social cues such as a playful nudge. Or it causes an overreaction, which leads to an increased risk of conflict and sometimes violence. These reactions can increase the likelihood of generating new stressful events. It's harder to deal with everyday challenges when you feel unconfident and anxious inside, and harder to build and maintain relationships. Over time, this can mean a child loses friends and the support of adults, and so misses out on opportunities to grow and develop. This social thinning can increase the risk of mental health problems in the future. Neuroscience research is beginning to shed new light on how vulnerability unfolds over a child's life. All children need care and stimulation from adults who value them and who show them attention and love. These experiences shape a child's brain development. When children face traumatic experiences like abuse and neglect, their brain adapts to help them cope. We know of changes in 3 different brain systems: the reward, memory, and threat systems. Experiences of domestic violence or physical abuse can lead to hypervigilance, where the brain reacts more to threat. This might help a child stay safe in an early adverse environment, but it can cause problems in more ordinary environments. Hypervigilance can best be understood as a pattern of adaptation rather than a sign of damage. Abuse and neglect can also mean a world where a child's basic needs for care and attention are not met. This can shape the brain's reward system, the part of the brain that helps us learn about positive aspects of our environment and motivates our behaviour. Over time, the brain's reward system can learn to respond differently to things like positive social cues. Neuroscience studies have also pointed to changes in the autobiographical memory system, our memory of everyday past experiences. Following trauma, negative memories appear to become more salient, which means they become more prominent than positive ones, and everyday memories can also become less detailed. This is a problem because we need to draw on past experiences to help us deal with new social situations. Neuroscience research is showing how childhood trauma can create latent vulnerability, increasing the risk of later mental health problems like anxiety and depression. This vulnerability is not just located in the child, but arises through their relationships. Helping children who have experienced trauma still requires ordinary boundaries and consequences, but it also requires us to step back and reflect and see behaviour that we find challenging in a different light. A child may simply be doing their best to survive now, with brain adaptations from the past. We know a child's brain has the capacity to continue to adapt. For this to happen, they need our help to build and maintain trusted relationships, manage everyday stresses, and prevent new ones from happening. We need to encourage them to try again and believe things can be different. This is far from an easy task and takes time. Science is helping reframe our understanding of childhood trauma. Seeing children's behaviour in a new light can mean we respond differently. But there is much still to learn. Working together, we can develop more effective approaches that promote resilience and recovery. We can help children build trusting relationships and create opportunities for their brains to adapt in new ways.
That was a short video about trauma and how it shows up in our daily life. Now we are going to take a short break and we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and today we're talking about trauma and healing. And joining us in studio is Judith Kennedy, who is the co-founder of InsideOut NPO. Judy, thank you for joining us and welcome to The Womxn Show.
Thank you. It's lovely being here, and welcome to everyone that's watching.
So Judy, I'm so excited to have you with us. InsideOut NPO is doing this amazing work. And so we know, mental health has been in the news a lot because of COVID-19, which is actually a good thing. It's elevated the narrative and the conversation around that. But we also know that access to mental health services is very low in South Africa. I think the statistics say 1 in 10 South Africans have access to mental health services. But what InsideOut NPO has been doing is bringing people together in their communities where they are to discuss I'm guessing trauma and just the things that they are going through. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work that you guys are doing?
Okay, so Inside Out was formed in 2019, and it comes out of a project of girls that's affected by violence. And that project came to an end, but it's in that project where we realized that the kinds of trauma that young women face in society is not being addressed adequately. We took it a step further when we started Inside Out and started talking about how do we start healing communities, because we're saying that if it is social determinants that are causing trauma, so social determinants in as an example, we talk about evictions, we talk about unemployment, all of those kinds of things. If those are the things that causes us stress and trauma, those are collective issues, right? And so how do we start collective healing? But also, how do we create spaces for collective learning and collective sharing? Because we realize that people in the communities that we work with, like you say, don't necessarily have access to the kind of professional support that is, or the kind of clinical support that is available. We also don't wake up and say, oh, today I'm traumatized, I need to go and see someone. And so for us, it's about how do we create those spaces and processes for people to be able to offload, for people to be able to talk about the issues that affects them deeply, that is seen as personal issues a lot of the time, and a lot of the time it is, but a lot of the issues are also collective issues. So how do we create a model for healing on a community level that is easily accessible to anyone that needs it?
I mean, that's great, Judy, and it makes so much sense because I have found you can do as much sort of individual and personal healing in different ways that you want to, but life is interdependent. So, you've got these insights. I remember at the beginning of my journey, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing all of this work. No one else is doing the work. And so you're sitting there sort of in limbo. But I do want to ask, though, trauma in itself, we talk a lot about anxiety and depression and PTSD and stuff, but trauma in itself, what was a wake-up call for me is not just, let's say with COVID-19, it's not just this COVID-19 or lockdown that we're dealing with now. We carry a lot of historical trauma also. So when I was starting to go through that, I'm looking at the domestic violence I witnessed and experienced when I was a kid, my sexual assault when I was at high school, all of these things that happened. But at the time, I didn't know what to do with it. What we did was we just, buried it, I kind of like to say, and you get on with life. And so I want to ask, before we go into sort of some of the healing and some of the strategies, how do we need to think about trauma? What is it actually?
Trauma is a disturbing or a stressing event that happens to you. So trauma takes many forms. Trauma, there's also for me two types, there might be more, but for us the most important types of trauma is systemic trauma, and then there's personal trauma. So systemic trauma and personal trauma comes from the kind of systemic trauma that we experience every day. And when I talk about systemic trauma, I talk about again, social determinants, lack of housing, the conditions that we live in, the kind of education that we get, the GBV, the kind of violence that we face in our communities all the time. And then there's intergenerational trauma, which is the trauma that we carry with ourselves that comes through our generations. So for us, that's the kind of focus areas that we work on in Inside Out. And those kinds of traumas manifest in different ways, in different forms in our lives. So, yeah.
So, and so what are some of the different ways that they manifest? Because again, I think before the show, actually, when we were chatting about having this conversation, we likened it to before your awareness that you have been affected by these things, it's as if you're walking around like a zombie, just sort of reacting to everything. And I know I've spoken to lots of people. For some of them, it's anger that they can't get a handle on. For some of them, it's deep sadness or depression that they can't get a handle on. And we see this all the time. But are those some of the ways that trauma manifests itself? Like, how can people look at themselves, I think, and just even begin to realize that, actually, I'm suffering from some trauma or traumas?
So those are definitely some of the ways in which trauma manifests. We find, if I can make an example, even if we go back to times of slavery and the DOP system and all of those kinds of things, those are things that runs and comes from generations back, right? And then today we wonder why we have high levels of violence, we have high levels of GBV, we have high levels of alcohol fetal syndrome. But those are the things that are the ways that trauma manifests. So if we look at a mother example who's pregnant, we most of us know this, that whatever you take in is whatever the baby gets, and that's how. So if you drink excessively and while you are pregnant, there's a big possibility that the child will have fetal alcohol syndrome. But this comes from, where does the drinking from the mother comes from? It comes from generations of slavery and the DOP system and the conditions in which our forefathers or mothers grew up in, and the surroundings that they had at the time And all of those things impact on the child that's in the womb. And so, and I must also just say that we don't just work on, we haven't just inherited negative um, traits from our previous generations. There's also so we talk about intergenerational trauma and resilience and the gifts that we've been given from our previous generations, because a lot of the time we focus on just the trauma, but we don't acknowledge the fact that we've also received gifts from our generations before us. So the the way it gets trauma gets transferred is, like the example of the pregnant mother. If the conditions that she lives in is not conducive, if people around her keeps on talking about or making remarks like, whose child is this now, and another child, and I hope she can raise this child properly, those are the kinds of things. Because remember, the child, while the child is in the womb, the child can hear what is happening. This is why we say play music to the child, we say read to the child, but the child also hears all the kind of negative stuff that is going around. And those are the things that manifests within that child. And then the child gets born into conditions that is not properly, or that is not conducive, and all of those things have an impact on that child even before that child is born. Um, so it's important for us to recognize that, and to know that whatever we do, um, while while whatever happened or whatever our conditions were while we're pregnant largely shapes what the child is going to manifest in life.
I mean, that's interesting, Judy. And I've also read, you're speaking about sort of the conditions and also sort of things that people say. And sometimes when I thought about it and I read about, we have now lots of research around the first 1,000 days, which includes the 9 months of pregnancy. And when I often think about it, I think about the mother's bodily reactions, right? So if someone's saying something to them or shouting to them, or she's depressed, or there's a lot of anger, all of those things will elicit sort of negative physical reactions, heart rate going up, however it will manifest in that moment. And those are part of the learnings that the fetus takes in about whether, I think I read in a book about whether the world outside is a safe or non-safe place.
Yes. And then to add to that, Lenina, the first 6 years, if we look at the 1,000 days, not the 1,000 days, if we look at the stages of development of the brain, right? The first 6 years of a child's life, this is including the 9 months, the child absorbs, the child is like a sponge, right? And absorbs everything around them, their conditions, behaviors of others. So the child soaks up all of that kind of behavior. That from the 7th year onwards, the child behaves the way that they in terms of what they've experienced in the first 6 years of their life. So if in the first 6 years the child is exposed to domestic violence, shouting, anger, gang violence, all of those kinds of things, that are the things that when the child becomes older, those are the kinds of behaviors and attitudes that manifests within the child.
So, Judy, one of the ways that you are helping people to sort of first see this, acknowledge it, and deal with it is to bring people together in the communities. And am I correct? Is it called healing circles?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so it's healing circles, and people come and they speak about they speak about themselves and their traumas, these adverse events, also the systemic trauma that they experience, not just growing up, but still on a day-to-day basis. And so I want to say, I often say when we're speaking about access to clinical services, that psychology or counseling is not cut and dried. You can't, I mean, I've been to see some psychologists, some counselors, and not everybody is a good fit, if I may say that. I've been to people who didn't understand my lived experience. So some were horrified by the stories that I would tell growing up in Mitchell's Plain and Kensington. Others would be like, someone else was like, oh, you've been through so much, I'm sure you're going to be fine, you know, because you're resilient. And so what I love about Inside Out is that it takes place in the community, it takes place within a group that understands the context. Nothing, you know, some things are shocking, but we understand this violence because it's so normalized. And so does that help, and is that, do you see that that helps the community or the group that comes together, that they are in a space where people understand?
It definitely does. I it definitely helps because we come from those communities, we come from the spaces where the kind of violence that people face every day, we've experienced a lot of those things. I think the advantage for us is also that we build relationships with people, and I think that is key in and relationships beyond just the circle. Um, and that is key in terms of people's healing, because we cannot just, and this is why we have the circles on a continuous basis. We try to have it twice a month. And it's just the space for people to come and talk about anything that they want to talk about. And what we find is that people appreciate the space so much because we don't have in our daily routine, we don't have the space to just breathe, because like you say, we just continue with this thing, traumatic thing happens to us now, and then we just continue with our life as if nothing happened. And this is how, and because there's such a lot of pressure on people to just produce and just continue, it's like we're on this wheel that doesn't stop. And the healing circles provides a space for you to just stop and think and talk about whatever it is that is bothering you. So there's no agenda, there's no, we work with what is in the room, because we're very clear that we work from where people are at and not from where we are in our heads. And that for us is key. So people do appreciate the space. We have a regular group of people that finds benefit in the healing circle, and we're hoping that more people will join us in that space, because the idea is also to, how do we get other people to hold similar kinds of spaces, and how do we kind of train people to so that we can have these spaces in every community, you know, where it's free. I mean, there's young people, we have 19-year-olds coming to those kinds of circles, and we have 65-year-old people coming to the same circle, and people can all relate. And the topics that we talk about are so diverse because of the kind of people that we attract. Our last circle, we had a whole conversation around how academia and the kind of trauma that academia places on students. So, and the topics, and then we talk about, you know, personal incidents that happen to people in communities and in the organizations and all of those kinds of things. Originally, the Healing Circle was created for, or not created, but the intention was to attract activists who are on the front line of struggles in their communities, and also healthcare workers on the front lines of COVID, just to provide people with a space to just come and dump, and to come and talk about the stuff and the issues and the challenges that they have. And we, based on our experiences, try and provide people with some tools to deal with some of the issues.
Thanks. Judy, we actually need to take a break quickly.
Okay.
So we are going to continue the conversation after the break. Welcome back. You're still watching The Womxn Show, and we are in studio with Judith Kennedy, who is the founder of InsideOut NPO, which is holding healing circles in communities for people to come together and help them deal with their trauma. And Judy, before the break, you were saying it initially started out as a space. You were hoping to create a space for activists who are on the front lines and healthcare workers during COVID to just come, and I'm going to use a phrase that I feel is inadequate for this, but just to start us off to sort of offload, right? They are dealing with all of these difficult things, and it's a space to come together and talk about it. But I think also, if we think about psychology and clinical services, it really all speaks about, it all starts with talking, right? There's something just magical about verbalizing those experiences. And I think probably what you see a lot of the time in those circles is people talking about things that they haven't spoken about before. We are well aware of the taboo topics that we can't talk about in our homes, our communities, in our schools, etc., which in itself is traumatic, right? We call it, in GBV, we call it the culture of silence. And so, can you speak about I wanted to ask you, and so is it also healing just to be able to say these things, this happened, to be able to have witnesses who acknowledge these experiences? Do you see a shift for people when they speak about something that generally they're not able to speak about somewhere else?
Definitely, Lanina. I mean, an example would be that we, in one of our programs, the I Define Me Tafelsig Girls program, we had a camp with mothers, a mother-daughter camp. Actually, it wasn't the Tafelsig program, it was another program. We had a mother-daughter camp, and so we had two cousins in the program, and their grandmother came with them. And the grandmother was 75 years old. And so part of the process was for people to do a solo and a mini solo, and that is just about them spending time in nature with themselves without any distractions. And that was she was probably outside for about 15 minutes. And then she came back, and so now we're taking feedback, and she tells us a story that she has been holding on to for 50 years.
Sure.
It's an incident that happened to her 50 years ago, and she has never spoken about it, and then she starts telling the story. And there's just so much healing in that, in being able to verbalize the things that's sitting inside you. And this is part of why our name is Inside Out, because we need to bring what is inside out, because we always say a story half told or a story, if you share your story, that's when you find connection, and that's when you feel a sense of relief because it's out of your body. And that was such a magical moment, because she shared that story while her granddaughters were in the room. And that is part of how we break intergenerational trauma. So talking about our issues to people, obviously, that we trust, and that so we take a lot of time in building trust and building a safe space and a safe container for people to be able to tell their stories, because we can't also allow people to just tell their stories and then we don't have any support for those people afterwards. And that's why for us, everything is a process. We don't do kind of once-off work, because we realize that once we've opened that can of worms, we need to be able to support the person through that process. So talking about it definitely is already healing. It's already starting the healing process, because we need to be able to acknowledge that, yes, this is what happened to me. This is what happened to me, not this is who I am. And I think that is important in the work that we do.
I wanted to actually come to that and touch on that. There's a book that was released recently called What Happened to You? And it was authored by Oprah Winfrey and psychiatrist, Dr. Bruce Perry. And the book is so interesting because what they're saying is that we are asking the wrong questions when we encounter someone that has adverse behavior or that has trauma or depression. Let's use depression actually as an example, or any of the other sort of what is deemed negative emotions and behaviors. I know that I've heard many times, and I think we hear this in almost all households, and so, what's wrong with you? So there's always something's wrong and someone's asking what's wrong with you. But the book asserts that all of this historical trauma and intergenerational trauma has impacted us, whether the trauma comes from school, whether it comes from, this actually, you were talking about systemic trauma. So asking what's wrong with you is assuming that let's use a violent community. In a community where there's violence almost every day, it's so normalized that you shouldn't be affected by it. And so when you come out and you're angry or you're depressed or you can't get out of bed, it's like, what is wrong with you? And do you see this? Do you see, being able to speak about it helps people to see that actually there's nothing wrong with me. I am having these reactions because all of these traumatic things happen to me.
Definitely. I mean, even if we look at young people today and the kind of behaviors that young people display, the question is, what happened to you? What happened to you that made you want to become a gangster, as an example? So the question is always what happened to you instead of what's wrong with you, because you are shaped by the conditions that you live in. You are shaped by the experiences that you have. And a lot of the times we get stuck in that cycle. We call it a vicious cycle. We get stuck in the cycle where the cycle talks about what we think, we feel, we do. Right? So the things that we think makes us feel in a particular way and makes us act in a particular way. And so, and that process happens so fast in the brain that we don't even recognize, we can't separate our thoughts from our feelings. And so part of what we do in our work with young people is to help them understand and see how that cycle works and then how we break out of that cycle. And so we'll use examples of what they say happened to them instead of asking them what's wrong with you, why are you behaving this way.
And so that's a good one. And as we shift maybe the conversation a little bit into fine, we can see and we can acknowledge that there is trauma. We can acknowledge, even we can shift over to think, okay, actually there might be nothing wrong with me, and actually, and here even to debunk this wrongness, because we're all unique and we all also respond in different ways. We've all had different life experience, so there isn't really one way to just be. But when we look at that, what it sounds like is also creating a much deeper sense of awareness about what we are thinking, but more especially what we are feeling and how what we are feeling affects our behavior. Is that correct?
No, definitely. Definitely. I think the first thing is about, recognizing and acknowledging that this thing happened to me. Because when you acknowledge that something happened to you, that is when you can actually start thinking about this thing that happened and thinking about how you're feeling about that thing and then acting differently. And by acting differently, you break out of the cycle. But that is obviously, it's a process. It's not something that happens overnight. It's something, and it's not an easy process at all. But it's a process that all of us need to go through.
Yeah,
all of us need to.
No,
there's never an ending. It's not like, okay, I'm going to deal with my stuff and now I'm healed, and now there's so many things that has traumatized us that it's we need to continuously be in the process of checking ourselves, checking what it is that we say to ourselves. Because a lot of the times we are, like people say, we are our own worst enemy. right? The stuff that we say to ourselves manifests, and we need to start changing how we think about ourselves and how we value ourselves, and stop the kind of negative self-talk, is what we call it. When you go to bed at night and you're lying there reflecting on the day, and you say to yourself, I was so stupid, I could have done something this way or that way. Everything is negative that you say about yourself. For me, in my own traumatic experience, self-talk was a very important thing, because it was when I started thinking differently about myself, I started valuing myself more. Um, but it's about being conscious all the time of what it is that you're thinking about yourself.
No, you're right. And I think a lot of the negative self-talk, and when you read about it and you see the memes, the things are also that even that negative self-talk is based on what's wrong with me. Because you're focusing on all the things that you think you are doing wrong. I had a moment actually driving in this morning where I remembered my brother said to me once that a friend of his said to me, wow, your sister does such a lot, and I'm just mentioning it here. So it's like, she does such a lot of things, how does she? And I was very dismissive of all of this in the beginning, but all of a sudden this morning I'm thinking, I do a lot actually. If this was somebody else, I would also be like, wow, how does she get the kid to school and, get dressed and put makeup on for the show and drive here and be on time and do this interview and we do so much, but we rarely acknowledge it. We still feel as if we are not doing enough. And since getting some awareness, that really shifted.
Yeah, a lot of the times we're good at admiring others and the work that they do and all of that kinds of stuff, but we really think. I mean, I also sometimes just sit and think, oh my word, did I really do all of these things? Because Facebook has the memories, and when the memories come up, I'm like, oh my God, I forgot I did this and that and that. And when people want to acknowledge the work that you do, it's almost as if you're dismissive of it, right? No, it's nothing and that kind of stuff. But actually, we need to acknowledge ourselves for the kinds of work that we're doing, but just also acknowledging ourselves for who we are as people, and people without labels, people without titles and those kinds of things. It's just us as a human being. We need to be able to acknowledge ourselves and say, you know what? You're a beautiful human being.
Yeah.
And then all the other kinds of things. But we don't acknowledge ourselves. And that, because we don't acknowledge ourselves, the negative self-talk and the negative stuff is what is on top of our mind. Of our minds when we.
You're so right. And the first time I went to go and see a counselor actually at Lifeline, I've said before, to try and break the stigma of seeking mental health services, I went, and I was very young. I was about 23 maybe, and I remember I was shooting off sort of my life story, and I said, oh, okay, and then I finished school. And then I went to study, and I'll never forget, she stopped me and she said, well, well done, I think, for finishing matric. And I was so underwhelmed, because well, that's what I'm supposed to do. And she said, we think that these things that we do because it's supposed to be normal is nothing, but actually it takes so much. It took a host of of little choices, little good choices for you to get to that point, and we need to be able to acknowledge that and pat ourselves on the back when we've achieved something. But we also know, I know, and especially women speak about this a lot, is how difficult it is for us to speak about success, or our successes, or things that we have achieved, because in a lot of cultures you must be very humble and you must not acknowledge these things. And so we're flipping a little bit, we're speaking about, it's interesting because we're speaking about how you're not supposed to speak about your traumas and how you're not supposed to speak about your achievements as well. And what are we left with, really? Just walking around with all of these surface level sort of small talk, barely existing. And this is why I think what your organization is doing is so powerful. It seems so simple that it's just bringing people together, but it's so powerful. I do want to ask though, Judy, you mentioned something. You said that in bringing people together and having these circles, it is important to do it in a safe way, in a safe space, and to also have support ready after sort of these, after disclosures or after somebody does something. And I want to just touch on that because yes, we are hoping that this will branch out and spread, but it's not as simple as just bringing people together and talking, right?
Yeah. No, definitely. And this is why I say kind of building relationships with people are key in any of the work that we do. We in the circles, so the circles has been attracting people that we've worked with before or people that we know personally for a long time, but there's also new people who come for the first time who we don't know. And as soon as new people step into the space, there's already a kind of culture within the healing circles that everyone is made to feel safe, everyone is made to feel welcome, everyone is made to feel that they can share in the space. And then in terms of the support would be offered based on what the conversation was in the room. So the support is not necessarily for everyone in the space, but we will identify people who we think need support and then offer that kind of support after the healing circle. Also, I think for us, it comes easy because we've been doing the work for quite a long time. Out is not just me. There's Van Kerk, who's the program's manager within InsideOut. Also have years and years of experience of working with people and holding spaces for people. And so it's a combination of experience, of lived experience, and a combination of how we have dealt with our own trauma. And what is the kind of lessons and skills that we've learned during those processes, and how do we help people through their own traumas based on that kinds of experiences. So it's all based on lived realities.
Yes.
And yeah, it's all based on lived realities and about how do we collectively move communities and people forward.
Judy, we've got 2 minutes left. I just want to ask you if you can very quickly, we've spoken about, you said tools also feature very heavily here. If you've got, it's 2 minutes, maybe 1 or 2 really good tools that people could take away from this program.
I think the one thing is verbalizing what happened to you. Another tool would be to journal, write the stuff down.
Yeah.
Notice your own behavior, become more aware about your own behavior and your own feelings so that you're able to track what triggers that behavior and feelings. Those are some of the kinds of tools. Shouting, go to the mountain or the sea or somewhere and just shout. It's about getting the emotion out of the body. Shouting and releasing and crying. And it's okay to cry, and we realize that in our day-to-day lives, we don't have an opportunity to cry really deeply like we want to. So we'll go in the bathroom as women and we'll cry there because the kids and the husband and whoever can't see us crying, So go somewhere where you feel comfortable and just shout and cry and get that release that your body desperately needs. And then start writing and talking and doing other kinds of stuff. Like I started painting, I danced, I did all kinds of different things to get myself out of this feeling
Yeah.
of negative,
Judy,
you
I'm
know.
so
So
sorry.
this,
We are out of time. I mean, I
no
think
problem.
we'll come back again and we'll have to speak about sort of that whole process of release. But I want to thank you so much for being here and for sharing with us today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
We are going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more after this. Welcome back, and what an interesting conversation we've been having about trauma, our reactions to trauma, and how it manifests in our daily lives. Now, before the break, Judith Kennedy from InsideOut NPO was telling us about a few ways that we can help process the trauma and work through it. To round off that conversation, we are going to watch a short video that will give us some insight about different tools that we can use to work our way through it. Let's have a look.
Hi, Psych2Goers. Do you always feel overwhelmed and stressed out? As you go about your busy life, the stress from your duties and responsibilities can easily take a toll on your mental health. Just like how your mood and feelings fluctuate throughout the day, your mental wellness will change during situations of stress and hardship. So to help you cope and improve on your health, here are 6 small habits to improve your mental health. Number 1, make light of tough situations. Do you see the glass as half empty or half full? Along with many other benefits, positivity has proven to affect your outlook on life for the better. When practiced over time, it can help you shift your mood and thought process during tough times to one that's more hopeful, optimistic, and accepting. By giving your thoughts a chance to go down a different, more positive route, a flexible mindset like this can prevent negative feelings from snowballing. It can also give you a chance to reflect on what's happened and allow you to think about what you might be able to learn from the situation instead of dreading over why it's happened to you. Seeing the challenges and bumps in the road as something more than what they are at face value is a great attitude to have in life, and also something that can help keep your mental wellness in check. Number 2, practice gratitude. There are many things we take for granted in our lives, like food, shelter, and even waking up each morning. And while it might sound obvious that these are all very important, it can definitely be easy to forget to appreciate the things we have. Sometimes you may only express gratitude when you finally get your dream job or that perfect test score, yet you'll be ungrateful and gloomy when times are tough or when thinking about the things you don't have. But the reality is that there's always something to be grateful for. Studies even show that people who practice gratitude are happier and less prone to depression. Making a habit out of counting your blessings can have great effects on your attitude, self-esteem, outlook on life, and mental wellness. Number 3, connect with nature. How is your relationship with nature? How much do you notice and appreciate your natural surroundings? Did you know that being in nature generates a multitude of positive emotions such as calmness, joy, creativity, and facilitates concentration? According to research, people who are more connected with nature are usually happier in life and more likely to report feeling their lives are worthwhile. Not only that, when you have a strong nature connectedness, you're also more likely to have pro-environmental behaviors such as recycling items or buying seasonal food. A healthy environment leads to a healthy lifestyle and mental wellness. Number 4, meditate. What do you think of when you see the word meditation? Perhaps it's being able to sit still for long periods of time. Or maybe you associate it with images of peaceful Buddhist monks sitting cross-legged. But meditation is much more than that. It's something that anyone of any background can do. While there are different reasons a person might choose to meditate, meditation's main purpose is for you to become mindful or aware of your thoughts and emotions. Mindfulness achieved through meditation can help you ground yourself, remind you to be present at the moment, and reduce your negative feelings like anxiety and stress. It can also help you identify any destructive habits and thoughts you have. Proper meditation is something that's learned with time and practice. But you can start small by spending just a few minutes sitting still each day as you focus on your breath and observe your thoughts. Number 5, put your thoughts and feelings onto paper. Have you ever tried journaling? Jotting your thoughts and feelings down onto paper can help you clear your mind and understand your emotions better. Like meditation, writing encourages mindfulness. During stressful times, writing down any negative thoughts or emotions you have can not only help you find a root cause for why you feel a certain way, but also help you find a solution. Being able to physically see your thoughts and feelings on paper may be enough to make you realize that things aren't as bad as they seem, since our emotions can easily make situations more intense than they really are. Whether in a fancy bullet journal or a piece of scrap paper, making a habit out of writing down your thoughts and feelings can help you understand your emotions better, manage stress, and ultimately be something that boosts your mental wellness. And number 6, take care of your body. While physical health and mental health are two different states, there are also ones that go hand in hand. This means if your physical health is neglected, there's a good chance your mental health might not be in the best shape either. Luckily, good physical health can help keep your mental health in check too. Doing things like getting enough sleep each night, exercising regularly, and incorporating healthy food into your diet can not only help you steer away from illness, but can also improve your mood, confidence, energy, and more. When your physical health is taken care of, your mental health will naturally follow suit. So making sure to tend to your body's needs is a great habit that can keep your mental wellness in check as well. So do you practice any of these habits? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, be sure to like, subscribe, and share this video with those who might benefit from it. And don't forget to hit the notification bell icon to get notified whenever Psych2Go posts a new video. The references and studies used in this video are added in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in our next video.
And that is all we have for today. Remember, the central question to ask is not what's wrong with you, but what happened to you, and work your way from there. Thank you for joining us. I'm Lenina Rasool. Good night.